Evening often arrives with a noticeable change in the rhythm of the world. The pace that carried the day forward begins to soften. Conversations slow down. Responsibilities settle into the background, and the environment gradually becomes quieter than it was only a few hours before. During the active parts of the day, attention usually remains directed outward. Tasks appear one after another, messages arrive, and responsibilities guide where focus should move next. The mind follows this structure almost automatically, responding to what the moment requires. As the surrounding activity begins to fade, that outward direction of attention slowly loosens. The environment no longer demands the same level of response, and the mind begins to notice the space that has opened. This shift can feel gentle and unfamiliar at the same time. After spending many hours responding to the world, the sudden presence of quiet can make inner awareness feel more noticeable. Thoughts that passed quickly during the day may linger a little longer. Small reflections from earlier moments can appear again with greater clarity. Nothing unusual is happening during these moments. The mind is simply adjusting to a different pace. Activity has slowed outside, and attention is gradually learning how to settle into that quieter rhythm. This is often the moment when the inner world becomes easier to hear, not because something new has appeared, but because the surrounding noise has finally stepped aside. The day has finished its movement. The mind now begins to notice what has been quietly waiting beneath it. When the environment becomes quiet, the mind begins to notice details that were easy to overlook earlier. During the day, attention is often guided by activity. Tasks appear one after another. Conversations continue, and responsibilities provide a clear direction for where focus should move. This outward movement of attention gives the mind structure. There is always something happening that requires response, and that steady flow keeps awareness occupied. As evening settles in, much of that external guidance fades. The surroundings become calmer, and fewer signals compete for attention. With less movement in the environment, awareness begins to turn inward more easily. Thoughts that passed quickly during the day can now remain present for a little longer. A memory from an earlier conversation might appear again, or a small reflection about the day may return to awareness. This change can make the mind feel unexpectedly active, even though the world outside has become quiet. The shift is not caused by new thoughts appearing. It happens because the background noise that once hid them has become softer. The brain naturally notices what is most visible within awareness. When external activity decreases, internal movement becomes easier to see. In many ways, this moment is simply a change in contrast. The mind has not suddenly become busier. The quiet of the evening has made its movement easier to observe. Once this shift is understood, the experience begins to feel less puzzling. The mind is adjusting to a quieter world. As the evening deepens, the mind often begins to revisit moments that passed quickly during the day. Small details that once seemed insignificant can return to awareness with greater clarity. During active hours, attention usually moves quickly from one task to another. Conversations unfold, responsibilities shift, and the pace of the day encourages the mind to keep moving forward. Many impressions are noticed briefly and then set aside so the next moment can receive attention. When the environment grows quieter, the brain finally has space to look at what was left unfinished. A memory from earlier may return, or a reflection about something that happened during the day may quietly reappear. This process is part of how the mind organizes experience. The brain gathers information throughout the day and later begins to place those pieces into a clearer understanding. Because this activity happens when the surroundings are calm, the movement of thought can feel more noticeable than before. The mind may appear busier, even though it is simply completing work that was postponed earlier. In many ways, the quiet of night gives the brain time to sort through the day. Events are reviewed, impressions settle into memory, and small questions begin to find their place. Nothing unusual is taking place during these moments. The mind is performing one of its natural functions, gently arranging the experiences that filled the hours before. Seen from this perspective, the return of these thoughts becomes easier to understand. The quiet of the evening has simply given the mind room to finish what it started earlier. As the night grows quieter, thoughts can sometimes seem deeper than they did during the day. An idea that passed quickly in the afternoon may return and stay in awareness for a longer moment. This change does not always mean the mind has become more intense. It often reflects the absence of interruption. During busy hours, attention is constantly redirected by new tasks, conversations, and small demands. These interruptions create natural boundaries for thinking. A reflection begins, though another event soon pulls attention somewhere else. The mind moves forward without staying with one idea for very long. Night removes many of those interruptions. Fewer signals compete for awareness, and the pace of the environment becomes slower. With fewer shifts in attention, a single thought can remain present long enough to unfold more fully. One idea may lead gently into another, creating a longer chain of reflection. This pattern can make thinking feel deeper than it actually is. The mind is not necessarily searching harder for answers. It simply has more uninterrupted space to explore whatever thought has appeared. In that space, reflections may expand slightly. A memory may connect with another memory, or a small observation may lead to a broader understanding. The quiet of the evening allows this natural movement to continue without pressure. Thought follows its own rhythm, moving at a slower and more continuous pace. Seen from this perspective, the depth of nighttime thinking becomes easier to understand. The world has become quieter, and the mind is responding to that calm. As the quiet of night continues, thoughts can begin to feel more personal than they did during the day. A simple reflection may carry a slightly deeper meaning when the surrounding world has grown calm. Daytime activity often places attention on what needs to be done next. Schedules guide movement. Conversations require responses, and responsibilities create a steady rhythm of action. In that rhythm, many thoughts remain practical and brief. Night changes the atmosphere around those thoughts. The absence of constant activity allows awareness to rest more fully on what appears within it. A memory from earlier may return with a little more clarity. A moment from the day may invite reflection rather than quick dismissal. This shift does not mean the mind has become more emotional or more serious than before. The difference comes from the space available for attention. During the day, reflections often pass quickly because something else immediately requires focus. When the environment becomes quiet, that urgency fades. Without pressure to move on, a thought may stay present long enough to reveal more of its meaning. Connections between experiences become easier to notice. A small detail from a conversation might lead to a broader understanding of how the day unfolded. A passing thought may open into a calm reflection about something that matters quietly in the background of life. The night does not create these reflections. It simply provides the stillness where they can be seen more clearly. In that stillness, the mind continues its natural movement, observing, connecting, and gently exploring what the day has left behind. When the world becomes quiet, thoughts often remain in awareness for longer stretches of time. During the day, attention is frequently redirected by movement, conversation, and the practical demands of ordinary life. Each new event creates a natural interruption, and many reflections pass before they have time to fully unfold. Night changes that rhythm. External signals become fewer, and the pace surrounding attention begins to slow. With less interruption coming from the outside, the mind is able to stay with a thought for a little longer than it could earlier in the day. This longer attention can make thinking feel heavier at first. A reflection that would have disappeared quickly in the afternoon may now remain present long enough to connect with other impressions. One idea leads quietly into another, and the mind follows that path without needing to rush. The slower movement of evening supports this process. Awareness no longer has to shift as quickly between different demands. It can rest more fully on what is already there. Because of that, thoughts may seem to linger. The mind is not necessarily becoming stuck. In many cases, it is simply moving at a pace that daytime activity did not allow. This slower rhythm can feel unfamiliar when the day has been full of noise and motion. Quiet creates more room around each thought, and that room changes how mental activity is experienced. Seen in this light, the length of nighttime thinking begins to make more sense. The world has softened its pace, and the mind is gradually responding to that softer rhythm. As the quiet of night deepens, reflections can begin to feel more sincere than they did earlier in the day. Moments that passed quickly during busy hours may return with a clearer sense of meaning. During the day, attention moves quickly between many different demands. Tasks appear, conversations unfold, and responsibilities guide where focus should move next. This steady movement keeps the mind engaged, though it rarely leaves much space for reflection to stay very long. Night introduces a different atmosphere. The surrounding pace softens, and attention no longer needs to shift rapidly from one signal to another. Within that slower environment, certain thoughts begin to reveal more of what they carry. A small moment from earlier in the day may return with slightly more clarity when it is observed again in quiet. This experience can give the impression that nighttime thinking is deeper or more emotional. In many cases, the mind is simply noticing details that passed too quickly to be recognized earlier. Without constant interruption, awareness can remain with a reflection long enough to understand it more fully. A brief conversation may appear in a new light, or a passing observation may connect with something that had not been noticed before. The quiet of night supports this kind of gentle clarity. Thought no longer needs to hurry toward the next task or prepare for the next response. Gradually, the mind begins to explore experience with a calmer pace. Reflection becomes less about solving something and more about quietly observing what the day has left behind. In that calm observation, understanding often appears naturally, without the need to force it. As the night continues, a quiet balance can begin to form within the mind. The overall pace becomes calmer, though certain thoughts may appear more defined than before. During the day, clarity is often shaped by speed. Attention moves quickly, and many impressions pass without being fully noticed. The mind keeps up with what is happening, though it does not always have the time to see each detail clearly. Night shifts that pattern. The slower environment allows awareness to rest more fully on what is already present. In that stillness, thoughts may appear sharper. A small idea can feel more distinct, not because it has grown stronger, but because there is less surrounding activity to soften its edges. At the same time, the general tone of the mind becomes quieter. The urgency that carried the day forward begins to settle, and attention no longer needs to move with the same intensity. This combination can feel unusual. The mind is calmer in one sense, though more aware in another. Clarity and calm begin to exist together. One does not cancel the other. Instead, they create a different kind of mental space, where thoughts can be seen more clearly without needing to be acted upon immediately. This space allows reflection to happen without pressure. A thought may appear, remain for a moment, and then move on without needing to be resolved. Over time, the mind adjusts to this quieter state. What first felt unfamiliar begins to feel natural. The night does not demand anything from the mind. It simply offers a slower rhythm where calm and clarity can exist at the same time. In quiet moments, some thoughts pass through awareness almost immediately, while others remain a little longer. This difference can feel mysterious at first, though the mind is often responding to meaning rather than to volume. A brief thought may disappear quickly when it carries little unfinished feeling. It appears, is noticed, and then fades because nothing inside the mind needs to stay with it for very long. Other thoughts remain because they are connected to something still open. A conversation may feel incomplete. A question may not yet have settled. A small detail from the day may continue to hold attention because it seems to point towards something not fully understood. This does not mean the thought is dangerous or unusually important. It often means the mind senses that a little more reflection is still needed before the experience can be placed down. Night gives these lingering thoughts more room to remain visible. There are fewer interruptions, less outside movement, and more space for awareness to stay with what feels unfinished. In that slower environment, the difference between passing thoughts and staying thoughts becomes easier to notice. Some reflections move lightly across the surface of awareness. Others return more than once, asking for a little more time. The mind often works this way when the world becomes quiet. It does not hold on to everything. It stays with what still feels open and allows the rest to pass. As this pattern becomes clearer, nighttime thinking can feel less random. Certain thoughts remain not because the mind is working against rest, but because it is still gently trying to complete what the day left unresolved. As certain thoughts remain in awareness, they can begin to feel larger than they actually are. A small reflection may take on a stronger presence when the surroundings have become completely still. During the day, many things share attention at once. Sounds, movement, and constant activity create a wide field of focus. No single thought holds that space for very long, because something else is always nearby to shift awareness. Night changes that balance. The environment becomes simpler, and fewer elements compete for attention. With less around to notice, whatever remains in the mind can appear more prominent. A single idea may stand out more clearly, not because it has grown, but because there is nothing else beside it. This change in contrast can make thoughts feel more intense than they truly are. The mind is not increasing the importance of what it holds. It is simply experiencing it without distraction. In this quieter setting, awareness becomes more focused. One thought can fill more of that space, and that focus can create the impression that the thought carries greater weight. At times, this can feel uncomfortable. The mind is not used to giving one reflection so much room. Still, this is a natural effect of quiet. When the world steps back, the inner landscape becomes easier to see, even in its smallest details. Over time, the mind can adjust to this experience. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel more familiar, as awareness learns to hold a single thought without needing to react to it immediately. In that adjustment, the sense of intensity begins to soften. The thought remains, though its presence no longer feels as heavy as it first did. When a thought remains in awareness, there can be a quiet impulse to bring it to an end. The mind may begin to look for a way to resolve it or to move past it more quickly. This effort often comes from a natural desire for rest. When thinking feels persistent, it can seem helpful to push it aside or replace it with something calmer. Yet the act of trying to stop a thought can sometimes make it more noticeable. Attention becomes closely focused on what it is attempting to remove, and that focus keeps the thought present. The mind works through attention. What receives focus tends to remain within awareness a little longer. In a quiet environment, this effect can become more visible. A thought that might have passed on its own during the day can stay in place when attention holds on to it, even indirectly. This does not mean anything is going wrong. It reflects how awareness naturally operates. When effort softens, a different pattern begins to appear. Thoughts are still present, though they are not being held in the same way. Without pressure to resolve or remove them, reflections often begin to move more freely. They come into awareness, remain briefly, and then shift on their own. This change is subtle. The mind does not become completely still, though its movement becomes lighter. Over time, the need to manage each thought begins to ease. Attention learns that not every idea requires a response. In that quieter approach, thinking continues without creating the same sense of effort. The mind remains active, though it no longer feels tightly engaged with every reflection that appears. As the pressure to manage each thought begins to soften, the atmosphere of the mind starts to change as well. The same reflections may still appear, though they no longer feel as tightly connected to effort. This change often happens gradually. A thought arrives and remains for a moment, though it does not immediately pull attention into a longer chain of response. There is a little more space around it than there was before. That space changes the rhythm of awareness. The mind is no longer moving with the same sense of urgency. Thoughts continue to come and go, though they do so within a calmer setting. In this calmer setting, the mind begins to trust that not every reflection needs immediate action. Some thoughts can remain unfinished for a while without creating the same internal pressure. This can feel unfamiliar at first. Many people are used to following a thought the moment it appears, especially when the surrounding world has become quiet. Allowing a thought to exist without pursuing it requires a slightly different kind of attention. Over time, that different attention becomes more natural. The mind still notices what is present, though it no longer feels responsible for carrying every reflection all the way to an answer. As that happens, the overall feeling of the night begins to soften. Quiet no longer seems like an empty space that must be filled. It becomes a place where awareness can rest more lightly with whatever is there. The world remains still. The mind remains gently awake. Even so, something within the experience begins to loosen. And in that loosening, rest starts to feel a little closer than it did before. As the night continues to hold its quiet rhythm, the mind does not need to become completely still in order for rest to begin. Thoughts may still move through awareness, though their presence can feel softer than before. The expectation that the mind must fully empty itself often creates unnecessary tension. When that expectation loosens, the experience of the night begins to change in a subtle way. Thoughts can remain without demanding the same level of attention. They pass through awareness more gently, without needing to be followed or resolved. In this quieter state, rest becomes less about stopping thought and more about changing the relationship to it. The mind is still active, though it no longer feels tightly engaged with every reflection that appears. This shift allows a different kind of calm to emerge. It is not based on silence, but on the absence of pressure. The night does not require the mind to solve anything before it can settle. It simply offers a slower pace where awareness can rest alongside whatever is present. Gradually, the sense of effort continues to fade. Thoughts lose some of their sharpness, and the space around them becomes easier to notice. Nothing needs to be forced in this moment. The mind is already moving toward a gentler rhythm, even if that movement is quiet and gradual. In that gentle rhythm, rest begins to form on its own. The world has grown still, and within that stillness, the mind is slowly remembering that it can soften too.